and we are here at our living room, and we welcome you for joining us this Sunday afternoon at 3. Together We Are One is all about equipping, educating, empowering, and providing information for all the women out there so that they know that they're not alone in whatever situation they're going through. So we're going to be sharing testimonies. We're going to be speaking about things that are real, that are raw, that are transparent. And the goal is not to bash anybody. This is not about talking about family members, what they did, didn't do, good, bad, or indifferent. It's not about them. It's about sharing the things that we have experienced in life that have traumatized us, that have caused for us to be angry, bitter, or cause us to have issues in our relationships, right? So by us speaking about it, it will help someone out there to heal, to be able to relate to it, right? It's about healing, being transformed and renewed in your mind. At the end of the talk show, you'll be able to go to our Facebook page, and we'll be able to provide you information, whatever subject we're talking about. This month of December, we're talking about childhood rejection and what did that feel like? Because we all go through rejection in life. It could be your family, it could be, your co-workers, it could be the people from the church. But a lot of times we don't realize that the issues that we carry as an adult come from the roots of our childhood. So that's why we're here. The Lord placed in my heart, for us women, it's time for us to be healed, to be whole, to be not just saved, right? But also to be healed and delivered and made new so that they can do the God-given purpose that God has for them. Amen? So, with that being said, we have Brenda, who's going to be sharing with us her testimony about her childhood. Okay? So, Brenda, tell us a little bit about how it was for you growing up.
For me, I grew up in a good childhood, but of course, Mom and Dad had separated when I was about 5. So, that right there was the beginning point of difficulties for me, not having both my parents in the household. But, as I grew older, my mom ended up in another relationship with my stepdad, and my father kind of stayed a little distant. So, and as a child, you don't really see certain things happening. You just kind of just go with the motion. You just realize that, okay, Dad's not here anymore. And it doesn't really hit you that he's not a part of your life. And being able to recognize that I was kind of facing a little rejection from not having my father always consistent or always around, it was something that I just really didn't take notice until now that I'm older. But I think for me, I faced mostly childhood rejection was mainly when I was in school. Not with my parents as much, because my parents were loving, but not in the sense where they were touchy-feely, like always hugs and stuff like that. For me, the most traumatic time and most rejection that I've ever experienced was when I was in middle school.
Would you say that you felt rejected also when your mom started her relationship with your stepfather, because now the attention was perhaps going on to him?
In a way, yeah. She kind of didn't really, because she grew up also not having a full structure in her own home with her own parents. So with my stepdad in her involved now, she kind of, it's not that she neglected us, it's that most of her attention was going towards making sure that things that needed to get done with him were taken care of. So me and my brother were we were always together, but it wasn't in the sense where we were receiving the actual attention that we needed, where she would sit down with us and talk to us and have conversations and check on how we felt and stuff like that. There was none of that going on. So
would you say, last week we had Catherine sharing a little bit about her story. Would you say, and can you relate that perhaps your family, right, being like the old school house, as long as we have a roof over our head, food on the table, and clothing in our back, we're good, right? Would you say that also took place in your home?
Yeah. As long as they were working the 9 to 5 and we were going to school and we came home and did our chores, that was enough.
That was enough.
Right.
What other times would you say that you felt the most rejected as a child? Did you ever feel like you needed to share something with them and yet nobody was there, or you didn't know how to speak to them about it because Catherine shared last week with us that she had been, had gone through a situation of malice, someone in the family molested her, and so she didn't know how to articulate it. And so that caused anger inside. And when she did share something, her mom kind of like made it a little bit worse instead of better, like dismissed it. And when we dismiss situations, conversations, and we don't face them, that makes us feel like we're not important, like what we're saying doesn't matter, or that we're making it up, or that we're lying, right? So what would you say for you?
For me, because I've always been quiet and I've always tried to stay away from being noticed. It was in middle school. Like, when I began my walk with the Lord, and as He started to heal my heart and deal with certain issues that I was facing, one of the big things was rejection that He wanted me to confront. And what He would keep bringing up was my time in middle school when I was bullied heavily. So with that, I couldn't tell my mom what was really going on because I felt like she wasn't going to understand what I was going through at the time that I was in middle school. So I just couldn't find a way to communicate with her that I was going through so much in school and how I was being treated. Because I felt like they weren't going to understand, or even, I know she would have done something about it, but I just had this fear of telling her and confronting her about that. But any other time, like, I would just always stay reserved and to myself, because to me, I just feel like nobody's going to really listen or care about what I have to say. So
what gave you the impression that no one would really listen or really care what you had to say?
I think in my household, as we grew up, there was always a lot of people at home. A lot of family were always coming over, and a lot of the attention was just going towards what was going on at the house at the time. So me and my brother would just kind of stay behind the scenes, kind of not noticed or not paid attention to, because there was so much other things going on in the household at the time. So maybe I felt that, because of that, I wasn't going to be heard. And even to this day, sometimes I still struggle with that, like using my voice and expressing myself to others just because of the fear of not being heard,
Could any of you relate to this? Would you say that you felt the same way growing up, that you were not heard, or that you didn't think that they would understand you, so why bother saying anything? Alina, would you like to share?
I grew up with my grandmother, and she was of the mind that children were to be seen and not heard. And if she's having a conversation with one of her friends, you are not to be there. And if you're there, you're not to say anything. So I could understand where Brenda is coming from when she's saying not feeling as though your voice will be heard even if you say anything. So I can understand.
And how did that make you feel?
Like if I wasn't important. I wasn't important enough to say something, even if what I said at that age didn't make sense. Some parents would say a child will come and have a conversation and they don't understand a single word that the child is saying, but they're going through the motions of as though they understood. I didn't have any of that. I didn't feel important. I didn't feel like what it is I had to say was important.
Do you believe that affected you as an adult?
Sure it did. I hardly say anything to anyone. And it takes a lot of courage just to say something. Yeah.
How about you, Catherine? I know that you spoke last week and you shared with us, but I think that the more that we hear of other people going through the same things, we can relate more to it, right?
Yes.
It helps us understand that, because a lot of times we go through situations and we believe that we're the only ones going through it, and we don't talk about it. We don't tell anybody, because, again, like they shared, they feel that no one cares, no one's going to listen, it doesn't matter, so why bother saying anything? Do you want to share anything else, Catherine?
I just think the reason, and just going back in my mind and in time with my feelings back when I was a child, and maybe this was also occurring with you and as well with you, we just didn't want to have the feeling of rejection again. We didn't want to be hurt again. So that's why I would stay quiet. I didn't want to be hurt again.
which caused for you to be hurt again anyways because
Right.
you didn't voice your opinion. You didn't voice your feelings, right?
Right, not realizing that everything was circulating, and then years down the line, you know, it's still there.
How about you, Raquel? What would you say?
You know, just listening to Brenda, and I'm just wondering whether or not you felt that you didn't want to ruin anything for your mom at the time. And that's probably why you didn't speak of it. You know, your daddy wasn't around, and at the end of the day, you don't want to end up losing your mother either. So you sort of were protecting your mother from what I'm listening and hearing. That you just didn't want to ruin whatever your mom had at that moment, and you were going to bring a damper to, you know, the people coming into the house, and, you know, being family-like, and, you know, doing all that. So you were put in the back burner and you stood there, you know, so to speak. I'm also hearing that during your parents' separation, that you and your brother were not given a voice for that. And that was taken away. So, and again, it goes back to not wanting to lose your mother as well. So it became a protective mode, not only for her, but for yourself. You know, not knowing, well, if I do say something, what's going to happen? You know, and that is normal. That is a normal process in our minds.
For a
you know?
child, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially for a child.
Yeah, you know, and I go back to what my sister here said, you know, child should be seen and not heard. And I remember growing up that, you know, we were trained and taught, programmed, however, you know, disciplined for, that if you had two adults, you never cross their path. If they're just, you know, they're talking, you never cross their path. And that's another way of, you know, although in my household, it wasn't more so, it was more of a discipline. You know, so we knew. I used to love the fact people come over to the house. Yeah, because if Raquel can go outside, she can do her thing, you know, play and, you know, do her thing, you know. So, but I do understand when you're not given a voice at a young age to be able to express, or if you just one word answers no or yes. And most 9 times out of 10 it was the word no. You know, right?
Right.
And
And
so
that's
a shutdown.
Yeah,
it really
it is a shutdown.
It takes away your voice.
Right.
Because, you know, and then you come to a point where you don't want to even ask, because I know what the answer's going to be. You know? So, yeah, so you know, it's easy. And if you realize, we may be from different cultures, different ages and so forth, but the experience seems to be similar,
Right.
you know, in the rearing of our life. So.
And so as we're sharing this, I'm thinking to myself, what about the new generation of now, right? How is it for them? Because I think that like you said, there's a different cultures here, there's different age here, but there is a similarity in our upbringing, right? And I think about today's culture and the youth today is like, I mean, I love you guys, but it's like a lot of times like there's no respect, right? You just go and get into the middle, you say what you feel. If your father or mother says no, you say why not, I don't care, and you leave. And so what would be their excuse of rejection? I mean, everybody has a different reason why they feel rejected as children. And a lot of times people feel rejected at different age for different reasons. Like, I know that she felt about her voice, Catherine felt about her voice being, you know, shunned from her mom because of what happened to her, and Brenda because her parents separated. But how was your relationship with your father that you felt that you were also somewhat rejected? Was there any issue with perhaps, you know, because sometimes a lot of times in divorces, people tend to either start drinking a lot, they start doing drugs a lot, they start doing little things. I know that when I got divorced, when I went through my divorce with my daughter's father, he didn't come to see much his daughter, not because he didn't love her, but because he felt and thought, I don't want to deal with you and see you. But she's probably feeling and going through, I know I'm being rejected by my dad because we were always together. Now that they're separated, he doesn't want to come see me. So in her little mind, she's probably thinking, well, Dad doesn't love me anymore. But in his mind, he's thinking, I don't want to see your mother anymore, right? But there's a sense of rejection. That gives an opportunity for that rejection mode to kick in, because it happens to all of us. Like I said, some people drink, some people, do drugs, some people just leave and don't want to deal with the pain of not living with their children anymore, or having someone else take their place as a dad. What would you say? How can you connect that with your relationship with your father?
With my dad, after my mom and my dad separated, I would, go over and see him on the weekends. But after a while, it got less and less. And I think it's like you mentioned, maybe he had his own struggles that he was dealing with that kind of would keep him from wanting to be around us for, to see us every weekend or whatever. Because my mom never kept him from coming to see us. But he had his own struggles that would keep him from wanting to be around us. And it would be sometimes we wouldn't see him for a whole year at times. And we would wonder, like, when are we going to see him? And now that I'm older, I realize what his struggles were. And I think he still does struggle with those things. And it was hard because for me, I was his little girl. And I always wanted to be around my dad. And not having him around just had a huge void in my life, because I was always trying to fill in that void in relationship, with my stepdad or with a boyfriend, filling those voids that I didn't have with my father, because he was always inconsistent in coming to see us or be around.
And how would you say, did you feel rejected by your stepdad, or did you feel like you rejected him because he wasn't your real dad?
I was, like, my mother raised me to always show respect to everyone around me. So I respected my stepdad, but I could never see him as my father.
Right.
Even though he was always there and was always a huge provider for us, I couldn't still, like, I didn't want to have him fill my father's shoes. So in a way, I kind of did reject him. And kind of kept him at a distance, in the sense where I'm like, I can't see him as my father. I could just only see him as my mom's boyfriend at the time,
And how would you say, do you think that made him feel like a stronger figure stepfather because he would try and you rejected him, or how was it for you? You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
He would try, but there were things like, because my dad left when I was around 5, so I really didn't know how my father's parenting was when it came to us. Like, I didn't experience that with my father. So my father wouldn't be too strict. He would just we'll meet with him and we'll watch movies and stuff. We wouldn't really engage with each other when it came to my dad. With my stepdad, he had his own younger daughter, but he was very strict when it came to certain things. So it was a lot of discipline going on in the house that we would not get from our original father. So in a way, I wouldn't reject him or not reject him, but disrespect him or anything like that. But I didn't like how he was kind of overbearing at times with me. So
not only did you feel rejected, not having your father there, you were rejecting him. So there was like a double whammy of rejection, right? So that probably made you want to try to work at things harder, because you were rejected, you were rejecting, and so with all this rejection going on as a child, you shared that affected you as an adult. But when you look back at your childhood, you also said that you were being bullied in school. In what way were you being bullied?
I was always, I would take the bus to school, so whether I was taking the bus or an actual school, because I went to school in the inner city of Hartford. So the school that I went to had a lot of diversity and stuff like that. So if you didn't have the right clothes or the right sneakers, you were going to get made fun of at the time. So every day I would go to school, and my mom was working, but she couldn't afford the new Jordans at the time, or the new FUBU or Nautica back in 97, 95.
She's not trying to give her age.
So you know, at the time, if you didn't have all that, you were not cool and you were not accepted by the people in, you know, the popular people in school. So every day it was constant bullying, or, you know, they would make fun of my pants or the sneakers I was wearing. When I would go to school, I would try my best to find friends that were well known in the classrooms, so that I can kind of stop being bullied and stop being rejected, which then turned out for me to be a people pleaser. So I felt that if I can please people, they would accept me, and then I wouldn't be rejected. So that started that cycle.
Can you repeat that again? Because I think that's very important that we grasp this. Can you just like share, because you said something really important there, because I believe a lot of people go through this and they don't realize it.
So rejection leads to you wanting to feel accepted, so then in return you start to please people. And you just completely just want to do everything for that person so they can accept you. And it just, you're not being yourself. You're doing things so that you can get the acceptance from others. And it just starts a whole cycle of you not knowing your self-worth. So
You kind of lose yourself, your identity.
oh yeah, definitely.
So you lose your identity in the middle of all this rejection. You're trying to please people so that they can accept you.
Right.
And then in the meantime, there's some anger and some stuff building up within you, right? Because either whether you're rejected or you're the one rejecting, or you're trying to please people or wanting people to accept you, you're doing all of this, but none of it is filling that void.
Right.
And none of it is making you happy.
Right.
So that just builds up more anger and more bitterness and resentment.
Right.
Would you say that you felt that you were resenting your mom, that it was either her fault or your fault, the divorce happened? Because a lot of times as children, we go through that, right? We feel like, oh, my parents got divorced because maybe me, or, you know, whatever that situation may be.
Yeah, I went through that struggle. When my dad would finally come around, I would resent my mom and not want to stay with her. Like, I would just want to go stay with my dad. And when it came time for me to go back home to my mom's house, I'm like, I don't want to go back to her house. I want to stay with my dad. So I would resent her in that sense, like, why didn't she stay with my dad? Like, what happened that they couldn't work it out? Because for me, I've always wanted that family structure, the wholeness of having the family unit together. And not having that caused me to have resentment towards her. And then after a while, I would have resentment towards my dad, because then he wouldn't be around. So it would go back and forth with them, you know.
I think it's really important to understand, and I really pray that, you know, as the viewers check in with us, that they would understand that a divorce is so devastating to a family. You know, it's like it's bringing a curse in the home, because now there's division, now there's resentment, now there's rejection, there's all these things happening. And so we grow up with issues in our mind, right? Thinking, you know, maybe it's my fault, maybe I could have avoided it, why didn't they stay together? They didn't think that didn't they think that, you know, I was worth them staying together to love me and to be a family? So, you know, there's a lot of root to a childhood rejection. There are different forms of issues that really come out when we're adults and we don't know where it really started. We can't comprehend that, wait, this started as a child, right?
Right.
Alina, would you like to share anything on that?
No, not right now.
Not right now? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone in school, like a teacher or someone, adult figure, what you were going through in terms of the bullying?
No, it even got to the point where I was facing a situation that a young girl, I was at the gym, we were playing volleyball, and the girl was next to me. I accidentally hit her ear when I went to hit the ball, and her earring fell off. After that, we end up in the locker room, and, you know, the girls are starting to whisper, and they're all looking at me. And before you know it, the rumor spreads that this girl is upset at me. She wants to fight me because I knocked her earring off. And I'm like, okay, like, what's going on? What did I do to her? before school ended, a girl comes up to me. She's like, well, so and so's very upset because you hit her. And, you just get this sense of fear, like, okay, if I don't hurry up and leave school, I'm going to get jumped on pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't go home and tell my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, this is what happened at school. I think I'm going to get jumped when I get to school tomorrow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I never went to anyone about it. Instead, I took the situation into my own hands. And I was able to call a friend of mine that had her phone number and actually call the girl that I, knocked the earring off and apologize to her. So I just did it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And by me apologizing to her and saying, hey, I can have my mom cover for the earring so that she could replace it. And she was fine with it. So I just told my mom a little bit of what happened, and my mom was like, okay, I'll pay for the earring if you lost it by accident.
Mm-hmm.
But I never went to the principal or to the, to any of the teachers. They actually had to come to me because of the rumors that were starting to spread.
Oh.
And because they knew I was quiet and reserved, they didn't want anything happening to me because of the other person and how they were acting.
Oh, okay.
But it was always me being quiet, not advocating for myself for anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, do you feel like, because I know you have 2 children, right?
Mhm.
You have 2 boys, which
Right.
is different than having a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that they've been able to come to you, that the relationship has been different as far as being open with you if anything happens to them, or do you see the same pattern?
Because of what I went through in middle school, I always tried to tell them to come to me. Like, I'm always reiterating that with them to say, hey, if there's anything going on in school, please come to me and tell me about that. Because I couldn't do that with my mom or anyone around me, and I was always fearful of wanting to tell someone. But so now with that, if like my youngest is having issues in school, or if I see that, he may be struggling with something, I always make sure that he knows that he can come to me with anything that's going on. Even if he sees someone else getting bullied for whatever reason, I say, come to me and tell me about it, or tell someone about it. And I'll try to tell my sons, and don't become a bully neither. Don't look down on anyone, don't be judgmental. If you see someone struggling, try to help them too. So I take what I've been through and learn from it and try to teach them so that the cycle breaks in that sense.
Right. Do you believe that your children have dealt or felt rejection, maybe not say anything to you, or have they ever shared that with you?
The youngest one has. If he's faced issues like with the teacher, not some certain things that the teacher would do or say to him, he'll come to me and tell me about it.
So do you see that he kind of has that, like, kind of quiet but feeling rejected?
Yeah. Yep. And if we're not talking to our children about these things, it'll continue. They're not gonna know what they're feeling or what they're going through. Plus, they want to be validated, and if we're not asking them questions or checking on them on their emotional well-being, they're gonna struggle.
It's very crucial that we speak to our children as mothers, right? When we are mothers, that they understand that they can come talk to us about anything. I remember with my daughter, I always share with her since she was very young. You could talk to me about everything. When she was 9 years old, she said, "Ma, I have to share something with you," but she wanted me to sit at the edge of the bed and not look at her.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So I would turn my back and she would talk. And then she told me about a boy on the bus, right? And I said, "Oh yeah?" And she would talk to me about it. But so she says, "Are you upset?" And I said, "No, baby, can I turn around?" She was like, "Yeah." So I turned around, and then after that, she felt that she can come talk to me. Because children a lot of times feel that you're going to be upset with them. And unfortunately, as parents, a lot of times we make these faces like, we're like, look mad. And so, I never wanted my daughter to feel rejected. And I was always making sure that I gave her extra attention because of the divorce that I went through with her dad. And that's a whole other subject. But we're talking about childhood rejection. I always wanted to make sure that she never felt rejected. And I would always tell her, Daddy's not here, he's working, but he loves you. She couldn't understand why he wasn't there like he used to once she got older. But I always wanted to make sure that she felt that love and that attention and not that rejection. I honestly can say that, growing up, I had both of my parents, right? And so as a child, my parents were there, but they were, again, always working. Not to say that they didn't care, not to say that they didn't give me attention, but they were always working. It's the same pattern about working. But we have these beautiful gifts from God, right? And then once we have them, we're rejecting them, we're neglecting them. And a lot of times we shun them because we're too busy, we're too tired, we're too stressed out. As single moms, we're worried. We have to do all this extra work. We have to figure out how we're going to get things done. We're trying to take our kids here and take our kids there. So I always make sure that I never wanted my daughter to feel that rejection. And I would speak to her about everything. But there was a time in her life that she didn't tell me. And because I remember saying to her, can you tell me, have you ever been bullied at school? Because I felt it in my heart. Because she was a little heavy. And she put her head down and she goes, yeah. And I said, well, why? She goes, because of my weight. And I said, well, why didn't you say anything to me? She's like, I didn't want to, I didn't want you to be upset. I said, why am I going to be upset? Because unfortunately, other children make other children feel bad, right? Feel like rejected. They're rejected.
Right.
Rejecting them because they're being rejected at home. Because only someone who's being rejected at home is going to turn around and bully other people, other kids, or reject them and treat them worse because they have to let out an outlet of anger somewhere.
It,
Right. Raquel, would you like to share any of that? Like with your
same
kids?
thing with my kids. Although I didn't go through any bullying in school, I had an older brother. So that being said, that's enough. And went through middle school and high school with my older brother. But I saw bullying. And I remember I was in 5th grade and there was one girl in school, she liked to bully little girls. And I got in the middle of one of them. Bad idea. But, long story short, it stopped the bullying for this little girl. Even though I had found myself running away. Because then everything turned on me, right? But after that, not only did the little girl was not bullied anymore, the girl doing the bullying also stopped. Even though I went to school, I said, okay, what's going to happen today? I didn't say anything to mom and dad about what I did, but I went to school anyway. But, so with my kids, I saw that. So I knew, how kids can be. And I did the same thing, and I would tell them, no, something happens in school, you don't take anything in your own hand. You come to me. And you also have your teachers, that have. So whatever happens, doesn't matter what it is, you come to me. I will deal with it. I promise you that I will deal with it. And I thank God, 2 kids went through the Britain school system and not once did I have to intervene in anything in that area. But it is important that our children understand and feel that they can come to us. Because another thing is, I used to tell my kids, listen, if you did something and it was wrong, okay, you may get punished for it, all right? But at least you came and you told me the truth. Right? So even if you do something wrong, come to me, and we will deal with it. So that, we have to foster an atmosphere in our home. And it's the same thing that we got gifts from God. They're jewels that God has given us. And it's just not about, okay, they're there, they're good, they got the food, whatever. No, it's more than that. The responsibility that we have as parents goes beyond that. Because, quite frankly, there's a saying, if one person can eat out of a plate, then maybe 2 or 3 can eat from one plate. But let me tell you something, emotionally speaking, we have to feed our kids. And every child is different. So we need to know how to feed our child, every single one of them, So it is something that only God can do. Be able to guide you and know, okay, this is what your son needs and this is what your daughter needs. Because there's 2 different, I have a son and I have a daughter, and they're both different, So, it is very important to understand it's not just about having children. It's about understanding the responsibility as a parent to each child that we have. And to understand that it is a long run. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
Whether you're a father or a mother and you're out there, you have a responsibility. And it is a marathon. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with you as a father and with you as a mother. That's it. At the end of the day.
Right.
You know, and it is very hard to understand from a child's point of view, why did mom and dad split? Because the one thing is, they will say, it was my fault. That's it. That's all they understand. It was my fault. They don't understand that between two adults there are issues that they're dealing with. And because the two parents didn't come across and say, hey, let's sit down. This is what's going on.
Or discuss with their kids.
It's not that we don't love you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Not only just saying the words, now I have to prove it. It's not about that we don't love you.
Right.
It's about us. Okay?
So Raquel, I know that last week when I knew that we had to talk about the subject about childhood rejection, I reached out to my daughter and asked her, did you ever feel rejected? And she shared with me, and I know that you said, you know what, I'm going to go ask my kids. Did you get that opportunity?
I did.
And
they said, no, Mom. They looked at me kind of weird. My daughter looks at me, what? I said, no, it's a question that we had in, the TV show, and I wanted to ask you. And I goes, no, Mom, never. Never felt that you did anything that would have rejected me. I said, okay, thank the Lord.
That's a good thing, right?
Yes.
So Alina, would you like to share a little bit more about, what other experiences you had throughout your childhood with rejection? Because I know that we had mentioned we were going to have her, and then since we're here, we might as well, talk about this, because it's important for the viewers, because we all come with that similar background, although we're different ages and different, ethnicities, right?
All right, so I grew up with my grandmother, as I've said before. My mother died when I was about 2 or 3 years old. So I grew up with my grandmother. My father wasn't there, and that was one thing, one part of the picture. There is a saying in the Caribbean that the last child killed the mother, and that when I heard that when I can't remember how old I was, but I was in primary school, which is like middle school, elementary school in the States here, and I felt as though I had killed my mother.
Wow.
And I didn't know at the time that she was sick. I thought it was because of me she died. And there were other instances when I was in, let's say, high school, in junior secondary in the Caribbean. There were times when I was just crying, not really crying in class, but my head was on the table and I was digging into my temple. I can't remember exactly what caused it, but I think it was because I didn't feel loved at home. My grandmother, she had about 11 children, I think, and some of them died when they were young. So looking back now, I think all that she had, her bucket of love was almost empty. So when it came to my sister and I, there was not much that she can give. She was depleted. So I think the love that I was expecting, I didn't get. All right, and not knowing the love of a mother affected me also, because like I'm not as articulate as some people. I don't like start conversations with random people like that. At times I'm not comfortable in my own skin, in who I am. So a lot of things happened that added to the rejection that I had. So it's only as I'm older that I could see, okay, my grandmother didn't have a full bucket to share with me, and I'm learning. I'm learning that even though that happened to me as a child, I still have a voice. It's a little harder for me to have conversations, but it's a learning process.
Did you ever voice to anybody in your family growing up about feeling rejected, or that thought in your mind about you killed your mom, or why, you know, how did she pass, or why wasn't my dad there? Did you ever question anybody?
No, I didn't. That was not something you did. You did not question the adults in the Caribbean. Like,
Yeah.
they tell you this is what it is and that's what it is, and you go ahead with that. Or you go outside and you play, you climb the tree and all that kind of stuff. No big conversations were had with children.
Did you ever even think to yourself, I want to be loved, I want to be accepted, or do I even know what love is? Because I've never seen it. So so a lot of times we can't say, like, articulate, I want to be loved, because we don't know what love is supposed to feel like or look like, because we've never received it. It's not to say that they love us. Our parents, for me, did the best that they could with what they knew, right?
Yes.
And so their best was their best.
Right.
And they learned from what, you know,
They knew.
which was not much because of the poverty, because of so many children, because of just trying to survive.
Right.
So they didn't have that time to just love and embrace. Although, in my reality, my truth, I believe that, you know, we should all take the time to love. It's important that we love one another. It's important that we acknowledge one another. It's important that we embrace the blessings that we have. Unfortunately, I'd really have to look into the statistics, but I know that there's a very high rate where children don't feel loved.
And in the Bible, that's the #1 command.
Right.
To love.
To love.
To love one
To love one another.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because I just spoke about that last night, about how we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our strength, and all our might, and love our neighbor. And who's our neighbor? But we're not even loving our own children, our own family members, and the love that we should be. So, you know, I can't even imagine. I sit here and I'm grateful to God that, you know, my father is very, growing up, I knew he loved me, but he was very firm, very cold, very strict, right? And then my mom, she loved me, and she was, you know, embracing and hugging and kissing, because she didn't have a mom. She knew what it was like to not have that love. So I truly believe that I had the best of both worlds. You know, I had the one that I could learn from it and not become like it, right? And the one good thing that I had from my mom, I took that and applied more to it, if that makes any sense, right? Because I always felt in my mind, in my thoughts, I don't want my children to ever go through this or feel like this, right? Because they worked a lot. They were always tired. They always made sure they had to get things done in the house. There was unfortunately, a lot of arguing. There was a lot of arguing. And so there wasn't any time to, you know, you can't say anything, because if you did, you know, blah. You know, my father, that's how he spoke, you know, because I'm the father and I said no, and that's how it is, you know. And I love my daddy, and I praise God, and I thank God that he's alive and that he's well, and that I get to enjoy him at this time in life. But the truth is that they don't know how to love. And I know that, you know, so many people are so rejected. I just feel like I have to share this. I shared about a happening that happened about there was a man that went to an area and had been beaten to death and almost left for dead, right? And so a person went by and ignored him. Another person went by and ignored him, right? So this man that had been beaten and left for dead had been rejected. Please listen. This man had also been rejected. He had people go by of high standards, right? And he was rejected. But the truth is that there was one person that was probably the least of the three, that was not as well off as the first two. He made a stop. he took the time to take care of that person that had been beaten down. And the history of this says all this person wanted was to, I'm talking about a beggar. I went from one story to another about a beggar, and there was a rich man. There was a rich man that would go by this beggar every day and not feed him. And so this beggar is there, and all he desired was to be fed. He had sores. And so what sores were they? How did those sores start? Where did they come from? The sores of being rejected, the sores of being abandoned, the sores of being shunned and like we don't matter. He had a lot of sores, and he was a beggar, and all he wanted was to be fed. And so as I'm sharing this history, I said, how are we any different than this beggar? We have sores inside. Rejection, abandonment, being shunned, being disregarded. We go through these rejections as children, and so all of that causes all these sores inside that causes us to be angry, causes us to be bitter, causes us to be shy, causes us to not feel comfortable in our own skin. Again, we're going through all of this, and that beggar, all he wanted was to be fed. He wanted to be acknowledged. He wanted someone to notice him. He wanted someone to feed him love. He wanted someone to feed him compassion. All he wanted was to be seen. So I ask you, how are we any different than that beggar? That's all of us, right? We all have different sores, whether it be a sore through a divorce or our parents getting divorced. Whether it be a sore of being rejected by our parents, by a teacher, by being bullied. We all have different sores. But how are we different than this beggar who wanted to be fed? His desire was to be fed. His desire was to be loved. His desire was for someone to minister and say, hey, how you doing? How can I help you? Do you need, what's going on with you? To be acknowledged. But he was rejected. So perhaps his rejection started as a child as well. Perhaps he had abandonment issues. Perhaps his parents died, because I know that, you shared that your mom passed away, and so we all have different areas where we felt rejected in some point or another. So we want to acknowledge that we're no really different than a beggar. We may dress a little bit better, we may smell a little bit better, we may look like a little bit better, but inside our hearts, we are no different than a beggar, because we all desire to be fed with attention, with love, with understanding, right? We all desire to be fed. And so for me, that was a big aha moment. It was really big, because we don't know his story. We just know that he was a beggar and that he had sores. And his desire was to be fed. And all of us want to be fed. So with that being said, if you see a beggar, if you run into your brother, your sister, your mother, it doesn't matter who it is. Ask them, how are you doing? And don't ask them just to ask them. Ask them because it matters to you, right? Because you care, because you have a voice, and because their voice matters. Let's stop rejecting one another, right? We need to love one another. The problem is that if we don't know the love of Christ, we will not know how to love our neighbor. And that's the problem. If we're feeling rejected, if we're feeling abandoned, if we're feeling neglected, we're not going to know the love of Christ. So we're not going to be able to understand and fulfill the desire of someone that needs to be fed. Right? So we're no different than a beggar. And Raquel, I don't know, if you want to share anything as far as that history, right? Because that was happening in any of you, but we can start with Raquel as far as that beggar wanting to, being full of sores and wanting, have desire to be fed and loved. Because I know for me, growing up, my desire as an adult, and I look at it, my desire growing up was that I knew my father loved me, but I wanted him to show me, not by working hard, not by telling me, embracing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to like sit with me and tell me, how is a man really supposed to love you? How is he
Right.
supposed to respect you?
Right.
How is he supposed to honor you? Right?
Right.
And for me, that was my desire, to be fed in that way with my dad. And I truly believe that growing up, I felt that rejection, right, as a child.
Right.
But it wasn't that he meant it.
Right.
There was 13 of them. They lived in the country. And as I got older, I understood that my father did the best that he could with what he had, and it was not much. I knew he loved me in his own way. But my desire was to be fed with love and attention from my dad. My mom on the other side gave us a lot of love and attention because she didn't have a mom. So she knew what it was like. But you still want it from daddy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that we can all relate.
Mm-hmm.
We want that love and attention from daddy. We want to be daddy's little girl.
Mm-hmm.
But we all desire attention and not rejection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Raquel, would you share?
You know, the story of that beggar, just what resonates in my mind is that you just want to be whole.
Right.
You just want to be whole, you know. And the only way to get to be whole is to understand that the way God created you, that's what's whole about.
Mhm.
That's what it is, you know. God created us with a purpose. What happens in our childhood and everything all has to deal with people making wrong choices, you know, because we all have a choice, you know. And then you have the influence of the outside,
Mhm.
okay? But it's not God's purpose, okay? And when you're a whole, which is something a goal everybody wants, we all want to stop feeling the way we have been feeling, right?
Mhm.
One way or another, we want to stop that. We want to stop feeling rejected and feeling that we were probably not enough, not receive the acknowledgement or the validation, you know, of that. And when it comes to wholeness, okay, and to be complete, like I said before, only one person can give you that. And that's
Right.
God.
But in all due honesty, not many of us were brought up with a relationship with,
Mhm.
you know, our Abba
right.
Father. And because we don't have that intimacy relationship, we've all been in different situations where we were neglected, we were rejected, we were abandoned because we were not fortunate enough to be brought up. You know, I was
Yeah.
fortunate enough to know of a God. I didn't know him personally like I do now, and I'm grateful to God for that. But we were all brought up in different situations. Some people didn't believe in God. Some households, they didn't believe in God and they did witchcraft. Other households just didn't talk about God. Other households, you know, you just talk to God when you need something, right?
Yeah.
So it's different, you know.
Right.
I know that we're running out of time, but I just wanted to give you a minute.
Well, two things. Identifying feelings. Children need to know how to identify feelings. What does a sad look like? What does a happy look like?
Right.
They need to know how to identify, because that was my issue. When I could not articulate, I didn't know how to identify what I was feeling. I couldn't match the words with what I was feeling. That was number one that I wanted to point out as a child going through that experience. And number two is, this is why I believe that God should be in the school systems.
Right.
Because when the families miss it, the school won't.
Right.
They're with the children more so than the parents,
Right.
I think.
Mhm.
Alina, how about you?
I want to reiterate what Kathy said. Children don't have words to say what it is they need to say. And I didn't have words because I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I didn't know what rejection was. I didn't know what love was. So, like, try and teach your children what the words to the feelings are so that they will be able to say how they feel
Right.
Yeah.
That's important. That's a really good, important, point that should be shared. How about you, Brenda?
I think as parents, like Raquel mentioned earlier, we have, if you have especially more than one child, understanding each child, understanding their love language too, so
Right.
that you can also be able to understand their emotional well-being, and just always communicating with them. If they come to you with questions, just be honest and real with them, and try your best to, explain or speak to them about what's going on with yourself or around them. Having that communication, and also showing love, hugging them, telling them every day that you love them.
Right.
Showing them that physical love as well.
I think it's important that as we're coming to a conclusion, to an end, that that we need to really talk more about what love is supposed to feel like, what love is supposed to look like, right? And as we're coming to a close to today's episode, we're gonna come next week at 3:00. I want to thank our Brenda, who's actually one of our panels, and for sharing her story, as well as Alina. I want to thank Catherine and Raquel, which is our panel. I also want to thank the girls that are behind the scenes, that are making this work for us and putting it out there. Kayla, Sonia, and Danae, who's hiding back here. We're very grateful. We hope that you share this. We will be sharing more information on our Facebook and YouTube channel so that you can get the information and the help that you want. We want you to feel and know that you are important, that you matter, that you're loved. And again, we're here to educate, encourage, empower, and equip you with information. So if you have any questions, you can go to Facebook, you can inbox us. We'll be more than happy to share with you. I want to thank you for joining us today. We will see you next week at 3:00. Have a great week.